Welcome to the Centaur Podcast. I'm Cameron Adibi, and I interview humans about their spiritual journey with horses. Each interview I have expands my perception and knowledge. This is no exception. I had the chance to interview Barbara Wheeler. She is a nature photographer with a strong emphasis on wild horses. Barbara started photographing as a youngster with her Brownie camera, never dreaming that 40 years later, she would spend a good share of her time immersed in photography. In 1998, Barbara insisted her life partner, Marty, get a hobby. He chose photography and enrolled in a class. She went along to keep him company, and the rest is history. They spent their first years as bird and wildlife photographers, have their images published in periodicals, books, and online magazines. In the course of spending thousands of hours in the field, they discovered the wild mustangs. At first, it was an off and on love, but grew to a passion. For over 20 years, they spent weeks to months with the wild horses and visited 68 herds all over the U.S. They feel it is the responsibility of photographers and other wild horse observers to educate the public on wild horses. After a lot of soul searching, she has decided to close her business at the end of 2024. So this was a very special interview to be able to talk with her as she's transitioning into something completely different. Barbara, thank you so much for agreeing to talk with me. And this is incredible. But I just ordered 2 of your calendars.
I saw that. Thank you, Cameron. I just approved your order. I was a little busy yesterday with blogs, so
that's okay. I can't. So I'm going some Christmas shopping right now. So
great.
A little plug in for anybody listening. Barbara Wheeler. I bought your favorite photographs for wildlife photographs of 2020.
And in my eyes, that's the best one.
Right, come on.
Because those are my favorites, right? Although it was interesting because my husband and I had very long discussions about which picture should be each of our favorites. Because I didn't think his favorite should be his favorite.
Yeah.
I thought it should be something else, right?
And this is also very interesting. We don't. Marty, your husband, is also a photographer, correct?
He is.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you guys have. And you travel together. So, this is really, but so before, I really have a lot of questions, but, I just got to start out and, not to get too deep into this, but, from Marianne Simons, who introduced us. Thank you, Marianne. She referred,
Thank you, Marianne.
Right. Just a great person, individual. What is a wild horse? In her definition, a wild horse is free roaming, social herbivores. How would you not to go too deep into this, but what is a wild horse?
Well, that's exactly right, because we could probably talk about that for a long time. And I am no scientist. Most of my knowledge is field work. To me, a wild horse is one that's living tethered to humans, unaided by humans. I wish I could say uninfluenced by humans, but that's not exactly true anymore. But no one's there to take care of them. If they have an injury, they're on their own. Thankfully, if water shortages are severe or the ranges get in bad shape so there's not enough food for them, the BLM will intervene often and do gathers. But up until the point where there's a crisis, they're pretty much on their own. So to me, that is what a wild horse is. Are they feral horses? Of course they're feral horses. They came from ranchers and the cavalry and Native Americans. And I can't speak to where they came to from before that. That's certainly Marianne's arena. So to me, it's just basically a horse that's out there on his or her own.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that, because it really, I think even that's a really confusing thing for a lot of people. But you are a wildlife photographer and have beautiful photographs of wild horses.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so you didn't do this. This wasn't this was you had you had a day job for a long time. When did you make that
Until
transfer?
2000, and it was about 9 years. So in 1997 or 98, I was trying to figure it out this morning. Um, we took a photography class, and that's how we got started. We both grew up in the country, so it was natural for us to do nature photography.
Yeah.
We traveled whenever I had a vacation um, to do nature photography of all kind, although we did things locally as well. And it was about 8 or 9 years later that we just bumped into the wild horses, basically. And from almost moment one, we were so taken with them that we pretty much put everything else aside. We still did it, of course. There was a beautiful bird or a beautiful sunset or beautiful bear or whatever it was. Of course, we took the opportunity to photograph them, but we stopped searching for them and began searching for wild horses.
Incredible. Wow. And
And
so
we didn't really turn back from that.
it's so cool. And so, I mean, you sent me a lot of information, but so you got to visit all 68 herds in the United States, North
Well,
America.
that's not all of them.
Okay.
I wish I knew how many there were. But it's more than anybody else I know. I mean, I've
Yeah.
never. There certainly could be people that have been more than us.
Yeah.
But I don't know them. We Because I was retired, that was a huge benefit, of course.
Yeah.
We could get a house sitter and go for 2.5 months traveling all over the place. In 2014, we took a 6-month trip around the United States. This is how we were able to visit the eastern herds.
Oh, good.
Otherwise, that would have
Yeah.
been much more difficult.
Yeah.
They're so far away, of course.
Yep.
But in the West, we would have 3 or 4 herds that we visited every year. Plus, we would add as many as we possibly could, new herds or new areas to go to. I really, really, really wanted to get to 70. I never got to 70 herds.
Yeah.
I just, the old body just says, okay, that's enough of that. My husband's 7 years older than me. He had to do all the hard physical work, mostly the trailer, etc. So when he said uncle, I said, okay, honey, your call.
Yeah.
It's your call. So
I think I told you over the phone. I used to live in Grand Junction, Colorado. So
yes,
I worked for,
you know what I'm talking about.
I know it, but here's the interesting thing. Now I live in Massachusetts, and now I have an interest in the wild horses. I worked for the United States Geological Survey, and I had no interest. I mean, I saw them in the distance, but I never had. Now I'm talking to you, right? It's so weird how that works, right? Now I live in Massachusetts. Now I want to go learn about the Book Cliff herd. But so this is just the alone. How you did this. For 2.5 months, traveling around. You said you basically are pulling a 29-foot Arctic Fox trailer on your Dodge,
Mm-hmm.
your trusty Dodge. So I know what these
very trusty Dodge.
These 2-track roads. I mean, some of them you don't even know if you're going to make it back to civilization.
They shouldn't be called roads, honestly. And
not,
you know that.
They're not roads. So, I mean, this Dodge, was a Dodge 250 Ram? Or 2500 Ram?
Oh, gosh, you're asking the wrong person. If my husband was here, he could answer it. It was one of the, it wasn't a longer one, but it was, it was a bigger one.
It was. I saw the photo. Yeah. So, I mean, these were, you were living out of this van, truck,
we were.
And trailer on the road for in the springtime, working from 6 a.m. to 8:30 p.m.
No. We would get up something like 5 o'clock.
Wow.
Be out the door because we always, as photographers, photography is all about light. So you want to be to your destination by the time the sun comes up. And if you're smart, you will be there before the sun comes up. So you can get yourself in place. Or in the case of the horses, a lot of times it's finding the horses.
Yeah.
You're not going to just drive out there and they're there for you. You're going to have to look for them. So we get up, and depending on how far away the herd was, we would get up at 4:30 or 5, be out the door as fast as we could get out the door. drive to the area and then start looking.
Yeah, there's no
We
GPS.
never,
There are no
no,
GPS
early
trackers.
on there was no GPS, and we could we could have a whole nother conversation about being lost, but we won't go there.
Yeah. By the way, my friend I used to work with said, "You're never lost. You're just slightly confused."
Oh, yes. Okay, we'll just say that. Slightly confused. Well, west, I see the sun is going down over there, so that must be west.
Right. Exactly. That's
The
exactly.
road doesn't go west.
Oh my God. So yeah.
And
So
then,
this is
and
like
then,
a full. Yeah. Go ahead, please.
yeah, and then we would not be back to the trailer again until well after dark because we wanted to get the evening light.
Yeah.
Sometimes we would come home in the middle of the day, depending on how far away we were from the herd.
Yeah.
And rest. I would almost always be working on the computer. My husband would sleep.
Yeah.
And head back out for the afternoon and then come back home after dark. So it was, that's why we couldn't just keep doing it forever. It really got to be difficult the older we got.
Sure. These are long days in the field and in tough country. And were you hiking and backpacking as well with your equipment?
Well, I wouldn't say that we backpacked per se, but we definitely carried our camera equipment. My husband would carry a 500 millimeter lens, which I don't know if you've ever seen that or not, but it's quite large.
Oh yeah.
And he's very tall, so he had and besides the fact that he had a heavy lens, so he had a very big tripod. So he would carry that, and he usually carried a smaller lens on his hip. I would carry my tripod with a 100 to 400 on it, which is not a small lens, but it's not anything like a 500. And then I usually would have something more in line of landscape type of lens on my hip. Plus, we had to have water and food. So, it would have been hard to have had an actual backpack on. I suppose there were times that we did, but it just completely depended on, where we were, how far the horses were, how far we wanted to go. And of course, the older we got, the less able not that we were able, we could, but we would suffer the consequences, so to speak. For some of those really long hikes with all that heavy equipment, it's not like you're going flat. And most of the places in the West are very rocky. There's a lot of volcanic rock. Some of them are very, very difficult footing. It just varied. Like I said, some places we would be, like we went to a place in New Mexico and, it was pretty much nothing but sand.
Yep.
Same thing with Salt River horses in Arizona. There's nothing but sand. So it was variable. And our decision to what we were going to do, how far we were going to go, how long we were going to try to spend, of course, you don't know that for sure, varied with where we were. And sometimes also how hot it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and how much water you had to carry just to stay hydrated.
Right. I mean, you're in Arizona in February. It sounds like, February, no big deal. But I'll tell you, it can get to be 90 in February in Arizona. So, yeah, it's, and then you go to someplace there's places we couldn't go in February. We'd go someplace in May in Wyoming or Colorado, and sometimes you would be snowed out.
Yep.
You would never get there.
Yep.
So it was sort of all over the map.
Yeah. Also, really want to really start asking you some questions about the herds and the animals, but the equipment. I've already revealed I'm a kind of geeky tech guy, but can you tell me what was your first camera that you started using in the field?
Oh my goodness sakes! I wish you'd asked me that, so that I could have looked it up.
Because you've seen. I did ask you.
It was a film camera. I can tell you that.
Yeah, so exactly, you were doing hard rolls, right? You had to get get these rolls developed. You'd have to send them off.
Yep. And yes, that's right. I had to send them off. We always had Canons. I don't think we ever had any other brand of camera. We loved Canon.
Me too.
So it would have been a Canon. It would have been a film camera. It would have been in the early 90s, which was our first really substantial camera. And we first shot film. We had a mentor who was a professional nature photographer, and she, of course, taught us so much. So after the first year or so, we went to slide film, which is better. But still, you have to send it off or we would take it downtown Seattle and go back and pick it up a few days later. And it would be multiple rolls because both my husband and I shot. Mm-hmm. So sometimes we would be picking up 8 or 9 or 10 rolls just from a weekend trip.
Wow. Wow. Well, here's one thing I observed, because I started, with hard film or whatever. You have film. You had to get film developed with my early career or early interest. I was much more selective about when I shot a frame. Was that your experience too?
You have to be.
You got to be, right? There's not
it's the money.
Yeah,
yep.
So
it's money.
Right.
Yeah. When you shoot digital, and we had plenty of flashcards, we just always made sure we, never ran out of flashcards. Mm-hmm. And we had big flashcards as well.
Yeah.
So, you're not going to hold your shutter down, the whole time.
Right.
When, something's running past, you select your shot. So absolutely there was a difference there.
Yeah. Okay. And then, of course, we actually talked about this over the phone, but, the early digital cameras were not very good. So you had to kind of, how did you kind of transition? How did that transition go for you?
Well, we waited quite a long time because, as you said, they were not very good. We all thought they were good, of course. Even some of the professionals thought they were good, but we waited a good long time and, really kind of listened to what there were still professional photographers back then. There's so few of them now, but listening to what the real pros were saying. So we didn't transition until 2001. And, we aren't wealthy, independently wealthy. So even though I was working and I had a good job, we needed 2 of everything.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So we had to be somewhat careful about how much we spent. We spent, plenty over the years, but we couldn't just go buy the top of the line camera for both of us. Digital cameras, especially, were very expensive in the beginning. So, we got good Canons, but at the time we thought they were marvelous. And of course, you find out later they weren't quite so marvelous as we thought. But still, you save a lot of money on film and on processing. So, and they eventually got better and better and better. And now, of course, they're pretty extraordinary.
Yep. I don't know. Do you ever feel like, it's kind of cheating in a way? It's just how easy it is to use. There was a real art in using, again, I didn't have the cameras you did, but I had, I was a river raft guide. So I had all these waterproof cameras I took down the river. But so there was a real art in how to capture a photo with the.
Yes, you couldn't manipulate. I suppose if you're Ansel Adams, you could manipulate it. But most of the rest of us, don't have a dark room where we can manipulate our images like that. So, basically what you brought home on your roll of film or your slide was what you got.
Yep.
Certainly there was Photoshop at the time, but you had to have a scanner. You had to get it in there. Photoshop was very much different than it is now. So in a way it's cheating. And I think some people do, quote unquote cheat. People are not always ethical with their photography. Adding things, subtracting things, fabricating things.
You mentioned this to me over the phone that
I did.
People actually questioned if you actually took photos of wild horses because they looked so good.
Yes, and I was stunned by that. It just seemed to me that it came out of left field. I even remember the photo that I was first questioned about, and I was just, like I said, stunned. It's like, what? Are you kidding?
Well,
okay. And then I said, well, where's the barn? Where are the fences? Where's all the sign of humanity? Right.
Yeah.
And, it was interesting because I had a fairly good audience at that time, and man alive, they came to my defense.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It was awesome. There's no way, that she would never do that. But it happened more than once.
It's incredible.
It didn't happen, 10 times, but it probably happened 2 or 3 different times. And these people would be very irate because their idea of a wild horse was some skinny, scrawny, starving, ugly bay. They couldn't imagine that there would be a healthy, beautiful wild horse out in the middle of nowhere. And that's really where it came from.
Yeah, there's 2 things that come to mind. One is that the lack of understanding, and so that was obviously this seems like a big role that I'm getting from reading some of your blogs and other stuff. But the other one is that it's a compliment. Your photos are they're stunning.
I did eventually sort of feel like it was, but
the capture, the emotion.
But to me, that was. That's fabricating. That I would never want to do that. I mean, I try to be as honest as I possibly can in my photography. Not to say I've never, removed an errant nose in a photo or, something that is just really distracting. It's sort of okay to add something. I mean, to subtract something, but you don't want to add anything to your photos. So, I try to be really careful about that so that my photos look like what I'm seeing when I'm out there.
I love, and I think that's why Marianne loves your stuff so much too. It's because you capture the expressions and the emotions. I can see them, I can feel them almost through the looking at. So let's go just jump into some of these incredible, and I'm going to show this on my YouTube channel, some of the slides here. But all right, so. Over 68 herds, and you had very close contact with 3 or 4 herds, correct? Is there one herd that you really feel the most connected?
Yeah, that's a pretty easy answer. We started in southeastern Oregon. That's where we photographed a great deal of our wildlife. And it turns out there was a herd there that we didn't know about for years, which is a whole nother story. But that was our first herd. And we spent it's probably fair to say thousands of hours over the years with that herd. When I was still working, when my husband and I both volunteered for a nearby National Wildlife Refuge. So we would volunteer, park ourselves at the refuge, do our volunteer work, and spend all of the rest of our time out at the horses. So we, it was a relatively easy trip out there. It was the one herd that we went to every single year except for one.
Which year was that? Was it the
it was later on. I'm going to say something like 2016 or somewhere in there. There had been a really big gather. We had a really big trip. So we opted to not go that one year, but every other year we were there, and we always spent the most time there. So we might spend 2 weeks, say, in, San Wash Basin in Colorado, but we would spend 3.5 weeks in Mustain. So we always spent a lot of time there. We got to know those horses very, very well.
And this is the South Steens?
South Steens, and it's in southeastern Oregon.
Okay, and so I'm really relatively new. This is for anybody listening. This is there's a big audience that follow these wild herds, And
yes, and that's a very, very popular herd. In fact, they're so popular that the horses, when they're gathered, go places like Spain and Germany and Portugal. It's amazing. I hear from those people all the time. Incredible. In fact, right now, there's a woman, I think she's in Portugal, if I remember right, maybe Spain, I can't remember, who just, this happens quite frequently, messaged me on Facebook, do you have any pictures of my horse in the wild? I live in Spain.
Wow.
And I'm not even surprised anymore because it happens so frequently. They absolutely love the South Teens herd.
It's incredible.
They're managed for pintos, so it's a quite beautiful herd. And I think that might be some of the appeal for people.
Okay. Well, I have definitely I'm looking at a photo, but more background about the herd itself. What was the largest number of the population, and what's the average number right now?
Oh, boy. That's a BLM question.
Okay.
Well, I think they say that the recommended or the average, recommended number that they want on the range is something. And please don't quote me here because I don't have these statistics in my head. But I think the last time I looked at it, they said that there should be about 175 horses there, which let's not get started on that because that isn't much for the amount of land that's out there.
Okay.
But they had two very large gathers, maybe perhaps three in very recent years, one of them being last year, where they removed something on the order of 900 horses from that area.
Yeah.
What's left now is probably, I don't know if it's 175, but it's probably in the, perhaps in the low 100s. And lots of everybody's, not just mine, but lots of everybody's favorite horses were gathered. And, many of them were adopted out. So it's a very different herd now than what we knew in the early 2000s.
Well, this is, also thanks to, reading your blogs and Marianne's book, Horse by Nature. Each herd is unique in itself. Yeah. And
very much so.
So I'm going to just ask if you can you give us some words to describe this herd? There's some words
this herd, part of the herd, it tends to sort of reside close to a highway. It's not a major highway, of course. We're talking about southeastern Oregon, so it's a small highway. But nevertheless, it's a route between two, small towns, but still. So they're visible often from the road, and they're accessible to people. So it doesn't take sometimes very much to just, jog up that road, and there are horses. So they become very desensitized to people. In the old days, when we first started, say 2003, 2004, they were still fairly skittish. I mean, they were used to people. They wouldn't run away from people, but they didn't want to come over and shake your hand. Well, now there's so many people traveling up there because wild horses are so popular that some of them will literally walk up to you, which is not such a good situation because things can, especially stallions, things can turn on a dime. It's not that a stallion's going to charge you necessarily, although, there's a story there for me.
I'm going to ask you about that. But yeah, it's not recommended. These are wild animals. It's not like
they're wild animals. It's true. And, it's that stallions might see something going on and they, chase each other and you're there. And that has happened to me a number of times. My husband as well. You just happen to be in their way, and they're not looking out for you. They're going where they're going, and they're big animals.
Yes.
So anyway, it's so the front part of the herd, very desensitized to people, and that part of the herd tends to congregate in a large number. We have, I think, at the most, I can't remember what year it was, maybe something like 2014 or 2015, 130 horses together in one place at one time.
So that is unique.
Now
So-
that's many bands. It's probably 8 or 9 bands. You throw in a few bachelors and maybe some lone horses as well. But they tend to congregate together, particularly in the spring when it's foaling time. So and they all know each other, of course.
Yeah.
They all know each other because they sort of live together.
Yep.
But if you go to the back country, go back away from where people have that kind of accessibility, you hike out, say, you're going to find individual bands. You're going to be much less likely, you might still find a large group of horses, but you're going to be much less likely to. You're going to find many more individual bands. That's it's kind of a unique herd in that there aren't that many that have these large groups that hang together for, months or, there's even a herd in Utah hangs together most of the year. Some other herds you go to, they don't do that. You go find a band. Find a band here and a band there. Maybe you'll find 2 or 3 bands together, but you're not very likely to find 100 horses together. So that's one thing that's one differentiating thing I think about some of the herds.
That's
Can I explain why?
I was going to say, I was like, so let's get the Marianne science. How is that? Why is that?
Well, I would imagine some of it has to do with protection, when they're foaling in particular. How many predators in the area? You say, what predators? Well, in some of these places there are cougars. That's probably the only predator aside from humans, unfortunately. Perhaps it's for protection against predators like cougars. And there are a lot of cougars in South Seas. I don't think any of the photographers that I know have ever seen one, but we've seen evidence of one. I mean, we've seen evidence of some. And, every once in a while, a horse will have some sort of an injury that is unlikely to have been inflicted by another horse, or foals disappear, things like that. So it could be for protection. It could be just because they're more social herd. And I bet you that's maybe what Marianne
that was my first reaction.
Some are just more social than others.
Yeah. And that they have that they all know, like you said, they all know each other. They develop these bonds from as foals, as youngsters.
Yes.
So they keep these bonds. This is we're not going to talk about domesticated, but in the domesticated world, the average horse is sold 4 to 5 times in its lifetime. All those bonds are broken. When they get shipped to a new family, a new herd, or whatever, new barn. So this is like they get these bonds with these, and they're in their different bands, as you said. So
and it's fascinating because I've sort of always been. I have 2 sons. I have 3 grandsons, so this is probably partly why. But I've always been fascinated by brothers, and I think you saw my photo of the teenage horse laying down with his baby brother with his head wrapped around him.
Oh my God! Yeah, so Juniper and
Juniper and Merlot.
Oh my God, that's I have done.
So that is probably my favorite picture of all time.
Okay, so I'm gonna
honestly.
That's gonna be in my calendar that I just bought, right?
It will.
Okay, good. So
yes, it will.
Let's jump. I'm going to show this photo on the YouTube channel. But so Juniper and Merlot. Juniper's 8 months in this photo, and Merlot's 2 weeks.
Correct.
And so, can you tell us the story there before that photo was taken? What was going on?
Well, Juniper, being a teenager, 8 months is. He was a very late. We got really lucky, and we were there when he was born the previous fall. And he was literally days old when we saw him. So we knew when he was born. That was very clear. That's very late for most wild foals. Most of them are in the spring, sometimes really early in the spring. So he's kind of an odd age. In the spring, you're mostly looking at your yearlings, but nevertheless, he didn't want to goof around with his little brother. He wanted to play with the big boys. Mm-hmm. So he was constantly off roughhousing with the other yearling foals. But his little brother and his little brother still to this day has quite the personality. Really was bonded with his big brother, and he pestered the heck out of him. And we went back again in the fall, and he was still pestering the heck out of him. But Merlot or Juniper had been playing with the other yearlings, and it was clear, they were bigger than him. He's tired. He went and plopped. I mean, he just almost fell down, plopped down. And Merlot wasted no time. He, ran over to him, and he's trying for all he's worth to get him to play with him. And there was just no way. Juniper went to sleep, and that was the end of that.
That's
but
so funny.
the expressions on their face just delight me.
Yeah.
I mean, just absolutely delight me. To me, that's what the wild horses are all about. Just exactly what you see on those two faces.
So yeah, just a little bit more description for those who are just listening. So Juniper's eyes are
asleep.
Eyes are shut. He's laying on the ground,
right?
And Merlot has got his head wrapped around.
Literally, and quite literally wrapped around his neck.
Yeah, but Juniper's Juniper's ears are fully attentive. He's still listening, but he's like, I'm going to bed. So he's like, he's being tolerant. He just like, it's so interesting.
He is, and he was very tolerant. And I mean, when we went in the fall, and they were both bigger, of course, and Merlot at that point would have been several months old. He just, like I said, he just pestered him. We have hundreds of pictures of him pestering him. And Merlot was very, very patient with him.
It's so
he never, he never was no kind of corrective behavior, didn't get irritated or, do anything that was untoward. He just, you could almost see him rolling his eyes, but he was very tolerant. And I love that. I mean, and we've seen lots of brothers, older brothers taking care of their little brothers, and I love that.
Yeah.
He's not the only one. It's not the only time we've seen that. And brothers, I think often, we don't sometimes know because, they grow up and they have their bands, and do they stay close together? I'm pretty convinced that a lot of times they do. They might. There might be some tension during this period of time when they're both getting their bands and building their bands. But once they get their band, I think a lot of times brothers do sort of hang loosely together, and maybe not even so loosely. There's some real, people don't think about stallions having bonds, but I believe strongly that they do.
I think this is one of your greatest gifts and I'm just, getting to know you, but this perception of misperception of stallions, how they're dangerous and they kill foals, they kill their young, which is you've proven that is not, that's absolutely false.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
Over and over and over again.
So how did that happen?
Go ahead.
How did that get stuck in our brains?
It was Facebook. I mean, remember, we were not horse people. We didn't know anything about horses. We knew about photography. We knew about wild animals.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about bears and, coyotes and elk and those kind of wild animals. So we don't have a lot of history with horses growing up. We don't know all these stories. And I think it's something like this. I couldn't tell you exactly, but probably something like I posted a picture of a stallion, on Facebook and get this, comment that, oh my, or maybe it was, the stallion was with a band, his band. Oh my God, you can't have a stallion with the mares and the foals. The stallions kill foals. It was another one of those utterly, stunning, like what?
Yeah. How did that happen?
Because I'd never really heard that. I don't think that's an uncommon. I know now it's not uncommon for people to believe
I've heard
that.
it. I've heard that before until until a couple of days ago, until I read your blog. I was like, oh, this is something I did not know. So, and then the other thing, and then you have sent me this I'm going to share this too online, that beautiful video of one of the stallion chief who was babysitting
Yes.
So, I mean, this is another thing I never knew, that the stallions actually babysit the foals.
It's not, and it's not uncommon, Cameron. It's not something we've seen one or two times. It's something we've seen dozens of times.
Incredible.
He
wasn't only babysitting.
And Marianne will address that as well if you ask her, because she and I are both really passionate about stallions and how misinterpreted they are. And that was in fact how Marianne and I first met, because she saw a picture that we had of two stallions walking a foal.
Mm.
And it was clear they were stallions because, of course, they have big husky necks, and they don't look like mares for the most part. They're walking this very little foal. And she saw that, and she made a beeline to our booth we were at a horse fair, and said, "Tell me about this picture." And it's like, well, okay. So that was the beginning of a long friendship. They're very gentle with their foals. They're very caring. They stand with them while the mares go off and have a break with their girlfriends, or they go off to feed, or they go to rest, or whatever. So we've seen that everywhere we've gone.
Yeah,
it's not uncommon.
This is something, again, I think so valuable of your work, that you've really shown how stallions are really good fathers. They
are.
And
if you think about it, because mares often don't stay with the same stallion every year. I mean, a lot of the bands are stable, so they do. But mares get kind of, some of them get kind of traded around. They get stolen, especially by young stallions who are trying to, build their band. They might steal a mare. But then she foals in the spring. That foal's not theirs.
Mm-hmm.
He belongs to somebody else, but they don't care. Doesn't make any difference whatsoever. I've seen no difference in the way foals are treated from whether that mare and stallion have been together the previous spring or not.
So wow.
We wish human beings would do that, right?
This is always the lesson. Horses are so much here to teach us if we just listen. So I have another photo I want to talk about. I don't think we talked about it previously, but you did show me some photos of Silver Bay, but there's a photo who's stunning. He is got a silver, and I had to learn this thanks to you gave me some information about. There's actually a dappling, a silver dappling, but he's standing next to Big Black. This is fall of 2010. What was going on? They are both stallions. Big Black. They
are both stallions. Oh, this is an interview all on its own.
This is incredible.
Okay, so so many stallions, not all stallions, but a good share of them have lieutenants who help with taking care of the band. So the lieutenant helps to chase away, younger stallions, or maybe even older stallions who are trying to steal mares. He helps to kind of keep everybody in order, traveling in the same direction when they move. And he has breeding rights. And some of the stallions, the relationship is tense. Some of the lieutenants are sort of self-imposed lieutenants, like, I'm going to be your lieutenant whether you want me to be or not. And the band stallion says, no, you're not. And so there's lots of fighting. But, often those lieutenants will still hang in there, and they'll still be with that stallion, band stallion years later. But the relationship between the Silver Bay and that black stallion, who other people have named Big Black, is completely different, because those two don't fight. I've never seen them.
That's
Not
wild.
one time have I seen them fight.
There's another thing that you're just blowing out of the water there, that all stallions fight. No. They don't.
Oh, they do. I mean, and you have to qualify fighting.
Okay.
You do have to qualify what you mean by fighting. Because do they bicker? Oh, yeah. Okay. But I don't even see that kind of tension between the Silver Bay and Big Black. And it makes me suspicious sometimes that they might be brothers because they have this relationship that's quite calm. I mean, I have watched numerous times. The Silver Bay will go over and mount a mare, breed, get off, walk away, and Big Black walks right up behind him and does the same thing to the same mare. And the Silver Bay just doesn't do anything. Sometimes, yes, they have breeding rights, but that doesn't always mean that the family or the band stallion is particularly happy with that situation. And again, like I said, it's complicated, so it's not something that's just sort of a short conversation. But those two have a real bond. Had a real bond.
It's a stunning
The Silver
photo.
Bay is no longer alive. So
I figured 2000, that was taken in 2010, but just another
right.
You could see
he died in 2019, I believe. He was 22 years old when he died.
Long
so
life.
nice
That's a long life, right? That's pretty long.
Yeah, for a stallion.
Yeah.
For a wild stallion, it's very long. And then what happens, and these are probably the more important things about having a lieutenant, when he dies, Big Black took over the band. So that band remained in a stable situation. There wasn't any, numerous stallions coming in trying to steal the mares away and breaking up that band. It stayed together. And I've seen that several times where something happens to the band stallion, the lieutenant just automatically takes over. And that provides real stability. In bands where, and I've also seen this, in bands where there is no lieutenant, something happens to the stallion, that family band becomes completely fragmented.
So this is a great
So mares go in all different kinds of directions. And I'll tell you, mares have very strong bonds. I've heard of, I don't think I've ever seen it, but I've seen evidence of it, and I've heard of it where, and Marianne can address that too, where, mare gets stolen away from her band. She won't stay with the stallion. She wants to go back to her girlfriends. I don't think she cares about the stallion. I think she cares about the girlfriend. She wants to be with those mares. They're very, very bonded to each other. So having that stability with the lieutenant, is awesome. I think it also prevents the band stallions prevents injuries because they don't have to do it all by themselves. Particularly when sometimes you might have 2 or 3 bachelor stallions trying to steal mares, and that is a lot to handle. That's how injuries happen.
And so this is a great segue into Golden Boy. So first, can we, before we go into Golden Boy, another stallion, can you tell us about this one very incredible, and you wrote a most short story about being charged by a stallion.
Okay, that was the Silver Bay.
That was
so
Silver
that
Bay.
wasn't Golden Boy.
Okay.
That was the Silver Bay. So it was our first intense experience with horses, I guess you could say. We had been looking for horses all day. Back in 2006, there wasn't real great access to sort of the backcountry areas. Even with a good 4-wheel drive, it could take you 20 minutes to go 100 yards because the roads weren't roads. They were just rocks. They were true two tracks.
Two
with
tracks,
lots of volcanic rock.
Yep.
Yeah, and very, very rugged. So you couldn't just, get off on, what seem like highways to us now, and run up because you've seen horses across the way. So we're driving up and down the access road, which is actually it's a good road, looking for horses, didn't see anything. Finally, I was always the eyes because I had really good vision, and I, spotted some white a long way away, and there's not a lot of white out there. So, binoculars showed, there might be a few pintos out there, but boy, they were a long way away. So we had to find a way to get to them. Took us quite a while, but we did get up to the area. And no sooner had we gotten there than they took off. And it looked to be about 9 or 10 of them. They were particularly close, but we pulled up to where they had been and stopped and got out of the truck. Kind of unusual for us to do that. I'm still not sure why we did, but we got out of the truck and we walked over to see, just to see if we could see where they were going. And they went over the hill, which is quite a ways away. And lo and behold, that stallion turned around and came back. It's like, what? That had never happened before. And he was truly ticked off. So he ran. I'm not real good at distances. My husband could probably tell you the exact distance, but he came, I don't know, maybe halfway back to us, stomping, snorting, tossing his head, rolling his eyes. And whoa, wow, gee, what's going on here? And we kind of sidled up to there was one juniper tree there. Otherwise, it's just grass and a few sagebrush. Nothing else, nothing to protect us. So we kind of sidled up to this juniper tree, and he stopped, and he, tossed his head, and he turned around and ran away. Oh, okay, well, that must be the end of that. Well, it wasn't. He turned around and came back, and this time he came closer. Okay, now it seems a little more serious. I mean, he wasn't, we didn't at that point really feel threatened, but it wasn't normal behavior. We'd certainly never seen anything like this before, nor had we heard of anybody being charged by a wild horse. Not like this anyway. And he did the same thing, stomped, snorted, spun around. Damn, he really put on a show. And then he turned around and ran off again. By this time, I'm kind of going, geez, okay, I don't know if I like this very much. We did not want to leave that juniper tree because it was a ways back to the pickup and it was all out in the open and we didn't know what we were dealing with. So we stayed next to that tree. Okay, is he really going to leave? No. He turned around and came back a third time, and this time he did get close. And as I described in my story, I was scared spitless. I didn't take one single photograph, not even one. So my husband's yelling at me, shoot. I'm shaking too hard. I can't shoot. He was not happy with us. I mean, he clearly was not happy. He was never close, of course, in retrospect, he was never close enough to threaten us physically. But he was a very big horse. You can see by his build.
God, yeah.
Look at that photo.
Yeah.
He's solid. And, he wasn't a particularly tall horse, but I wouldn't have wanted to get hit by him. So he, puts on his little show. This picture is, I think, from I can't remember which charge it was. But anyway, at this point, my husband said, well, what are you going to do? And he said, well, get some rocks. I'll pop him in the nose. Ha, ha. I tease him about that because I don't think so, honey. But anyway, I said, he's so close. And my husband finally raised his head above his tripod and above his lens and said, oh my gosh, he is close. Yeah, okay. And fortunately, he decided he'd had enough of that and he ran away and he never came back.
Oh, that's
whoa.
That's intense.
I'll tell you,
yeah.
I shook for a long time over that. So
that was in 2006.
It's only part of the story, of course, because we went back the next day. Always a glutton for punishment. Mm-hmm. Went back the next day. Would he happen to be there? You never know, of course, they're going to be in the same place. He was. And he had a band of 9 horses with a brand spanking new foal. So I'm sure that foal was why he behaved like that. For all I know, that foal could have just been, basically hours old because we've been around lots of newborn foals, even foals that are hours old. Umbilical cord still hanging out. Stallions don't do anything. But something set this guy off. When we went back the second day, he barely looked at us. We didn't even think it was the same horse. It can't be the same horse. He's not even looking at us. but he has a big, welty kind of scar on his hip that there was no doubt it was the same horse. So just different behavior. So I don't know if he thought he proved to us that he was the boss. We definitely knew that. But we had we were with him for about 2 hours the second day. A completely different behavior. So he was always my favorite horse.
It's incredible.
From then on. Yeah. We saw him almost every year. Mm. He always was one of the more elusive bands. He wasn't, I think only one time did I ever see him with that group of 100 or 130 that I was talking about. He always kind of stayed in the background, a little more elusive. Wasn't afraid of people necessarily. He just wasn't as social with them. Mm-hmm. He's not a stallion I would have ever tried to, get close to. I was always very respectful because I knew he had a defensive mode, I guess you could say.
Yeah, this, it's just all these different horses you've got to learn about and their bonds. But I know now I just going to ask. I mean, how being a photographer, right? How has that altered your relationships? Do you think with the herd? I mean, these herds obviously they got to know you. How do you think
they did?
How would that?
I don't think there's any doubt about that. It's hard for me to say. I mean, perhaps one thing would be that when they went out and we found them, we would be with them for long periods of time. And a lot of people, if they go and visit, and I've seen them, of course, do that. They'll go and they'll stay for a little while and then they'll move on and look for more horses. Mm-hmm. So maybe the fact that we would find them and stay with them, sometimes all day, mm-hmm. and day after day, which is why I know I could tell. Don't ask me how I could tell, but you get the sense that the horse knows you. Oh yeah, I've seen you before. I know you, and they don't feel perhaps afraid of us because we've never done anything. We've always been respectful of distance. Yeah. So we always had big lenses, so we could do that. We could stay back. If we ever got too close, it was always because they came too close, not because we went, usually anyway, that we went too close. Sometimes they come to you. Mm-hmm. That's kind of a different story. So that's kind of hard for me to answer. I mean,
there's a relationship.
The familiarity, maybe.
There's a relationship going on there. I work with, I do the equine therapy. I'll work with a lot of different people. Some people always ask
mm-hmm.
me, a lot of people will ask me when they come, do you think the horse will remember me? And of course they do.
Oh yes,
they remember. Because they're all about the friendship model. So they're gonna know who you are. So I'm sure he recognized you. If that was his. It seems like that might have been his. Gave you an acceptance. That's my interpretation. But what do I know?
Yeah, that's probably a good way to put it. That we were accepted. Nobody runs away. They stay there, do their horsey thing.
Yep.
So they trust you. Accepted you.
He gave you a stamp of approval.
Yeah, and we've all heard. I'm sorry.
He gave you a stamp of approval that you didn't run off, never come back.
Right. Well, first of all, he didn't kill us.
He's right.
And then the second day, he just ignored us. So I guess that is a mark of acceptance. But it's funny because some of the horses, there's certain horses, not all of them, but there are certain of them that they're just kind of show-offs. I mean, we show up, and all of a sudden, they're like doing these outlandish things. It's like, oh, you're such a show-off. Yeah, I mean, you just sort of have this sense that they're putting on a show for you. Others just sort of ignore you and, go about their business. But, we've had them, what seemed to be, almost this conscious, let's parade in front of them. we're set up with our cameras, and they just go one by one in front of our cameras. It's like, this is crazy. What is going on here?
I was wondering that because, I work with this older gelding. Again, he's domesticated, so no comparison. But he avoids the camera. He doesn't really want to be in it. It's interesting. I'm thinking there's just like humans. Some are like, let's do some let's do some selfies. Let's get some more selfies of us.
Yeah. It's like, I have your full attention now. Let me see what I can give you. Yeah, sometimes it's pretty crazy. I mean, those things are, not necessarily common, but you kind of get to know some horses that are, sort of show off.
Okay.
And they all have different personalities.
All right.
Just like people.
I have so many questions, and it's unfortunately I'm focusing on stallions. So this is where you and Marianne are going to have to go in our second part of this interview. We're going to talk more about the mares, but I have to ask about Golden Boy because we did talk about the lieutenants, and with Silver Bay, he had his lieutenant where. So first, Golden Boy, another stallion. And it is a harder read, but who had to be euthanized, and again, these horses are in the wild. Their lives are much different, and they're shortened too quite a bit. But what happened? Why did he have to get euthanized?
Well, this is a situation I think where Golden Boy had a lieutenant, this whole scenario probably would have been different.
That's what it seemed like. It was a lot of chaos afterwards. A lot of unsettledness.
Oh my gosh, yes, there was chaos afterwards. That was, at least half of the story, really, because most of the people I knew that were photographing wild horses, none of us had ever been on the scene when a horse went down, and to see those other stallions rush in and separate those mares. So there were a lot of bachelors in the area, just sort of loose bachelors in the area that year who were really trying to get mares.
Does that mean they're? You have to help me out. So that mean they're not part of any band?
That's right. Okay. No band whatsoever. Some bachelors will band together and become a bachelor band. But generally what happens, they get to a certain age and they'll kind of strike off on their own to try to find a mare. And the easiest, probably the only way for them to get a mare is to steal a mare.
Interesting.
So they're going to try to steal a mare away from another stallion. And a stallion, I don't know, I'm not in a horse's head, but, it's easy to kind of say, well, a stallion that doesn't have a lieutenant, he has no help. It's going to be much easier to pick off a mare from him than it would be someone who's got someone else helping him. So somewhere in the process, and we were not there when he was injured. We got there just after he was injured, but somewhere in the process, he had injured himself. I don't have any doubt. It was over, fighting over mares. I had a friend that had been there maybe a couple friends even who'd been there just days before we had been there, and said that there had been one stallion in particular who had been really, really tormenting Golden Boy. So it was probably in the course of a fight with him that he was injured. And of course, the bachelor stallion, his name was Blue, was going to take full advantage now of him being injured and just kept harassing him and he harassed him until the very end. So we saw he was injured. We were there for, it was probably about a week that we'd been there before he was euthanized, but he started losing weight. He was obviously in pain. He could barely walk, and being harassed. And what happened over time was it was started with just Blue. And somehow these stallions I don't know, is there a telegraph out there? I wasn't sure what was happening. But it's like all these stallions just started appearing out of nowhere. Like, they sense or they know that there's a stallion who's not doing well, there's going to be an opportunity to get some mares. And there were stallions all over the place. It was remarkable. And so he had just Blue bothering him, and then he had two other stallions bothering him, and then 3 or 4 stallions bothering him. So he just couldn't. There's no way he was going to be able to protect his band, even though he valiantly tried. Interestingly enough, his mares tried to protect him in the end.
I couldn't believe that. They surrounded him, you said in your
they did.
Your piece.
They did surround him. Yes. And one of the videos you were not able to watch because my book went to archive the day that I gave it to you. But I encourage you to go back and look at it. There's a video there of his lead mare protecting him and the other band members from Blue.
Mm.
She actually charged him.
Wow.
Which you don't see mares do that very often. They're usually pretty docile. They, kind of stay in the background. They don't try to attack a stallion. So Marty and I grew up in the country. We were around wildlife all of our life. We were nature photographers. Neither one of us could tolerate watching what was happening to the golden boy. And as far as I could see, there was no way he was ever going to be able to recover. Probably even if he lost his band, I didn't think he was going to be able to recover. He had a very serious injury. So we went to the BLM and we showed him video that we had, and I had some still pictures of his leg as well. And they agreed that they didn't think he could survive it. And so they did come out and euthanize him. And I, of course, could not watch that happen. But we were there, literally minutes after he went down. And I think 4 stallions moved in seconds and took his mares.
Incredible.
And then over the course of the next week, they're fighting over who's going to keep those mares.
But this is all survival. This is all how they survive.
It's all survival.
And,
That's right.
But there was no lieutenant, which makes me, he was just, this golden boy was just such a powerful stallion.
He was, and he was a big horse. The pictures you see, you see the one that's at the very end is him at his healthiest, and he was a very sizable horse. We knew him. He was one of the first wild horses we ever saw. So we had followed him for many years, and to my memory, I don't remember him ever having a lieutenant. And some of them just don't. They just, who knows why?
Yeah.
They chase him away. They don't want a lieutenant. They don't. Who knows? I don't know, but I've always thought, especially when there's an injury, when there's been a lieutenant, things just go so much further. There's another example, unfortunately, the very same year, of a beautiful stallion. Both of these two had really big bands, and he became injured. He actually died. I believe he died. And his lieutenant just smoothly took over everything. It was just such a world, 2 weeks apart. I think they died 2 weeks apart, and there was just a world of difference in what happened to the band in the aftermath.
I think the really 2 things I'm getting out of this as I'm listening to you is that one is that, each herd is unique, but they're also very, very sophisticated on how they operate. So it seems like
they are much more so than you'd ever appreciate, I think. Yeah, I agree.
So
I agree.
As we're kind of coming to an end here, we'll have to kind of really, I'm really hoping you and Marianne agree to having a conversation with me.
I think it would be fun, although I don't envy you.
I'm going to have to reel Marianne.
You better get your ducks in a row.
Totally. I'm going to have to reel both of you in. But, this is to bring in some of the mare influence here, too. The first question is, mares can be leaders. There's not this.
Yes.
They have a different. There's a. I like Mark Rashid's books. Do you ever read? Have you ever seen his? He's a Western cowboy.
I haven't.
But basically, the mares are the mares are the decision makers. Is that what you've noticed?
They have a lot more control than any stallion would ever like to admit.
Yes, and that's what I've been told too. Thank you.
Yeah.
So they are really, they don't have all the show, but they're making the more critical decisions for the herd.
Well, and I think they hold the memory, where's the water? Where's the food? They make the decision when they go to water and when they go to food. Honestly, if you watch them for long periods of time, it's the mares that make those decisions. The stallions just fall along behind. For the most part, they're not. I don't think I can ever remember seeing a stallion decide it's time to go to water. Let's go, guys. Mm-hmm. It's always that lead mare in the band says, "Let's go," and everybody kind of gets in line and off they go. Same thing when it's time to forage or to feed. The stallions are the protectors. They're very important. They're very important. There's no doubt about it, but they don't, to my knowledge anyway, and what I know from the range, make most of the critical decisions.
That's what I've thought. And thank you for confirming that. And then, the other thing is, after Golden Boy, just, big, larger than life kind of character, how did you notice the herd grieve his loss?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think there was so much chaos that there wasn't even an opportunity for them to do that. But I did watch, because I was very interested in this whole thing about, the aftermath of Golden Boy's death with the mares. To watch each of them, I tried to keep up with each mare as best I could, see what was happening with them. For instance, Golden Boy's lead mare had been his lead mare for years, many years, ended up in a band that had a lead mare. Now what? Well, guess what? The old lead mare, the original one, she did not want her in that band. She was trying to chase her away. She was kicking at her. She was just kind of ruthless. And the band stallion just stood there and kind of watched it all happen. I mean, what's he going to do anyway, right? But it was challenging for those mares. They were very subdued. If I could put a human emotion to it, I would say probably depressed.
Yeah. Okay.
But I don't think they had much opportunity to actually grieve just because there was so much chaos. Yeah. And there were other stallions trying to move in and, take those mares away. I actually watched that happen. A more dominant stallion actually just walked into the band. He just walked in, didn't race, didn't fight, walked in, took a mare and left. It was almost comical.
Jeez.
So there was no stability for them. I don't think even for months, because in the spring, some of them had stayed with the original stallion, some of them hadn't. There was just a lot of shifting around. I think it took quite a number of months for them to really kind of settle again, and they lost their girlfriends or their daughters sometimes, because they're pretty bonded. Mothers and daughters are pretty bonded, so that they'd be off with another band, and I'm sure that was difficult. We have had the occasion to see on a couple times where there's been a death in the band, and it's very interesting to watch how the horses react, because I don't have any doubt, none, that they grieve when they have the opportunity to. Mm-hmm. They definitely grieve.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. That's we know that they have a rich emotional vocabulary, as well as they're so sensitive.
Yes.
But so this is so cool talking with you, and can't wait to get my calendar. But so, some sad news here. You are closing up shop end of December, right? This is it.
Yes, I am.
So so good. Hey, people listening, get your calendars, get your prints. I have some homework from which prints I want to get. gifts. You got the barbarawheeler.com. Is that correct?
BarbaraWheelerPhotography.com.
Yep. And I ordered the Barbara Wheeler's favorite photos for 2020-25.
Thank you, Kim.
Yeah, calendar.
And you know that I think I told you that I'm telling the story of each photo in the in both of the calendars actually.
Yeah.
So my thing is storytelling, and so I'm trying to tell the story of each photo. Sometimes there's a real story, and sometimes it's more like this is how we might approach something. But many of them have like Merlot and Juniper have real stories associated with them, and so I'm doing that for all of the pictures in both of the calendars through the end of the year.
Well, every part, and there's many parts of our lives that we transition. So I'd like to stay in touch. But you've said you might like to.
Yes, likewise.
You said though you would.
It's been fun, and it'll be fun with Marianne.
Yeah, completely. But you would like to maybe even do some equine programs in major universities who might take your photos.
Well, I certainly want to have some sort of a lasting wild horse legacy. I think it's just figuring out what it is. Marianne's been trying to help me make some contacts with major universities. We have thousands and thousands and thousands of pictures. There are millions of pictures out there probably now. To me, it's almost more the stories that are associated with the pictures. That's a little bit harder to find someone who can handle that and wants that.
Let's talk. So I'm interested, but I got to just ask, as people are listening, what's like a message you'd like people to take away with about wild herds that you've met?
Oh boy. There's such an important part of our history and even our culture. And I just so hope that they don't end up disappearing. Now, I don't really believe they will completely disappear because horses are very resourceful. They're going to find some little place that they can hang out where there'll probably always be somewhere, but not like it is now where you can drive out and you can visit a herd or spend a day or spend a week or spend 2 months. I don't have any solutions for what's happening. I just don't know how to do that. But with all of me, I hope they don't go away. That we always have them.
I totally hear you. And I also agree with you. They've been here. They've been with us every step of the way. This entire human journey that we've been part of. They've been here longer than we have. So they're gonna find another way to keep. But yeah, I appreciate that as well. And I hope to actually now I have to go spend some time with the wild herd now. I'm very curious.
I hope you do. It's a very unique experience.
I'm going to have to ask you offline.
It's very, it's really worth it. And you have herds in the East. Yep. They have definitely different personalities because they're so desensitized in the East Coast.
Yep.
But, if you want to find the more quote unquote wild ones, you would come to the West. But if you have the opportunity, we don't know how much longer there's going to be opportunities for that.
Right.
Even in the South Steens herd that was so big, I mean, if you can't just drive out and find horses now because they've removed so many of them, it's just become so much more difficult. So take the opportunity. If anybody wants to see wild horses, now's the time to do it.
Thank you for that. I hear you loud and clear. That's going to be something I'm going to talk to you more offline about. So, thanks again, Barbara. And so, please.
Thank you, Cameron.
My pleasure. Please check out Barbara's website. And again, till the end of December to order prints, photos, and calendars. Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you. We'll be in touch. Thanks, Cameron.
Have a great evening. Bye. What an incredible journey with both Barbara and Marty. I'm sorry I didn't get to talk with Marty, but great news. I'm going to have a follow-up interview with Barbara and Mary Ann Simons. Mary Ann Simons and her have been working closely, and They have so much insights. So to have them both on one call, one interview will be just hold on to your seats. So please stay tuned for that. And please, again, if you would like to explore more what I'm up to, just check me out at Cameron Adibi. That's CamronAdibi.com. And please send me messages, or if you have any interest in being interviewed, send me a shout out. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.